The function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. Welcome to the Paid Forward Society, where we believe that leadership is a continuous learning journey and where knowledge is passed on to the next generation of leaders. I'm Roman Jordan. I've been learning and practicing management of global teams for about 10 years. In this podcast, we will explore the many facets of leadership as we talk to inspiring managers, entrepreneurs, coaches, veterans, and athletes who empower their teams and deliver results. Together, we will discover the keys to success through empathy, purpose, and care. So join me as we embark on this journey to become better leaders and create a better world. All right. Hi, Remi. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. Good. Welcome to the Paid Forward Society.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight.
So, thank you for accepting. I got to meet you via a business club, the French founders.
Correct.
And actually, we are recording from their premises in San Francisco today. So thanks to Clara and Antoine here for organizing this for us. Clara is our community manager for the West Coast, and she introduced us. So, Remi, I've been looking forward to this discussion. When Clara told me about you and the years that you spent researching the topic of company organization and structures to improve the engagement of your people, and also the fact that you have actually implemented some of those, recipes in your company, I was super excited about it and wanted to know more. So I had a chance to meet you quickly last week, and you were nice enough to pay me a drink. Thank you again for that. So you have nearly 40 years of experience in building and managing companies. Is that right?
It's more than nearly.
Nearly.
Let's say 40.
Okay, let's say that. And presently, you are the president of Blue Trail Software, a tech company.
Correct.
That you co-founded 10 years ago in the Bay Area.
Correct.
And so this is an IT outsourcing company. So you are providing services to other companies who need your developers to build new systems and applications. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly this. We just specialize in sophisticated applications. We don't develop any kind of applications, only sophisticated ones.
Okay. So mobile and every type of application.
those either mobile applications or web platforms, but that use the latest technologies and need the security, AI, or other advanced technologies. That's what we do. And also we are not the largest company around. We have a list of references that few companies have. They include Samsung, HP, Cartier, Logitech, car maker Renault, etc.
Yeah, small customers that we heard of. All right, cool. So today we are not here to talk about tech, although I love that. I'm more interested in learning from you your journey into leadership, understand your path, and the changes that you faced earlier in your career, and actually what brought you to finding new ways or looking for new ways, because that's uncommon what you have done, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you how you did it and how you are changing the status quo in this space. Also, you went on a PhD to study this specifically, so I'd like to understand what you learned from this PhD and what you applied in and how you did it. Also, because I think a big part of that discussion should be about how you did it, and also what did not work, because sometimes it looks good on paper, but that doesn't work because people are people, and they are. It's not necessarily easy to do that. I want also to dive deep into employee engagement and what it means for you, and how to build that environment where people can thrive and deliver the best for them, and also for the company, for your customers. I think that's super important. And I have many other questions. So this is basically the agenda for today.
Okay.
And I'd like to start the discussion by having a quick intro. Who are you, Remi? Who are you?
So I'm Remi. I'm a French Italian American. So it's a little bit of a complex background, but I was raised in France where I started my career as a math teacher. But I rapidly realized teaching was not a job for me. And a friend told me, but you should try to be a software developer. They hire, they train. So started as a software developer and rapidly climbed the ladder to end up to a CEO position in my early 30s. And then it's a long story that took me here, and I've been in the US, in the Bay Area actually for more than 25 years. Now, in terms of my past experience that is relevant for this discussion, I started working in France already in a large outsourcing company. And from the beginning, there was one thing I didn't like. It was a very pyramidal organization, very hierarchical. And of course, when you start, you're a young person, you're at the bottom of the pyramid. And I had this feeling that I was a commodity. I was not important for the company. I was disposal. If I'm not happy, or they can just leave. That's okay. There's no impact a way or the other. And even as I grew up in this company and then in other companies up to the position of CEO. When I ended up being a CEO, or even before when I was a VP, I said, well, I want to manage my team differently. And it's okay. And it's the same with many company founders. They would love to manage their company differently, but how?
Yeah.
There is nothing really that tells you what to do. When you say, I want to be good to people, they say, well, but look at, for instance, in the US, Chouinard due to Patagonia, or in France, Leclerc due to Decathlon. And this is wonderful, but it's not something you can easily replicate. Those people have a very strong personality, and the company is really a reflection of this personality. So they call for higher values, and they manage to convince their employees to share those values. And it's wonderful, but not everybody, the average founder, the average CEO is not a Chouinard, or is not this kind of people. And so I really wanted this current venture, Blue Trail, is likely to be, hopefully, my last business venture. And I really wanted it to be good.
Okay.
And I really wanted to say, okay, I don't want to do something that's approximative, something that might be good, might not be good. I want to understand what's cooking in the research, in the academia. Maybe there are some business models that are emerging and I'm not necessarily aware of. And it might be in the US where a lot of things happens when it comes to organization and business models, but it might be in countries like, I have no idea, India or South Africa. I wanted to know. So I live very close to Berkeley, and I was thinking, well, that's going to be very easy to do a PhD. I am 10 miles away from the Berkeley University, but I found only the classical MBAs that teach you management. And well, it's not that there is nothing for me to learn in management, but I had a long experience of CEO, and so it's not what I wanted. What I needed was something about new organizational models. And I couldn't find anything at Berkeley or on the West Coast to this matter. And I noticed that the most research was actually done in the Midwest. Michigan, Illinois, these regions, Indiana. And I found a university in Illinois that had a PhD on so-called values-driven leadership. It was not exactly what I wanted because I wanted to discuss company structures, and this was more oriented towards leadership. But well, that was a good step. And at this stage, I want to make sure everybody realizes that leadership is one thing, management is another one. You can be the biggest manager ever and never be a leader, or you might be a leader and not end up being a CEO. Now, of course, the graal is to be a leader and a manager.
So what's the difference in your mind? I mean, how do you Split them up. Oh,
Well,
yeah. You have some.
there are many differences, but if I have to come at a glance, I would say manager, they maintain the status quo.
Okay.
And leaders, they question the status quo all the time. Managers are risk averse. Leaders take risks. So managers, they control people.
Okay.
Leaders inspire people. And the list goes on and on.
Okay. So the managers are keeping the lights on and make sure that everyone, works at the rhythm, and leader are inspiring people to.
That's correct.
To innovate and to think differently.
That's correct. And again, being a leader and a manager is the best you can imagine, because some leaders are very poor managers, and that doesn't work very well. And some others are managers, but no leaders at all. And they need to use strong discipline or politics or to keep the people working for them. So that's also not very desirable, at least in my opinion, of course. So I went there to this university, and the discussion in the academia today revolves mostly around the personality of the leader, the servant leader, the level 5 leader, the humble leader, the transformational leader, and the list goes on and on and on. And while I think this is important, it helps understand everything, I wanted really to focus on the structure of the organization, because the leader might change more often than the structure of the organization. If I can use a comparison with the US, for instance, the president of the country changes every 4 years or 8 years, but the Constitution of the United States, fortunately, by the way, doesn't change every 4 years. It's pretty complicated to change the Constitution. So I wanted to find these sort of elements that were invariant, constant, immutable. Well, immutable, I don't really like this word, but that were not changing easily.
Okay.
And implement those elements in the structure of the company to guarantee that what we were doing at the beginning, where things are relatively easy in terms of organization, would survive when the company will grow, become larger, and where indeed the organization will become more sophisticated, more complex. And that's really was the purpose of my dissertation.
So why is that important that they are long-lasting? I mean, it seems that you are saying that they are long-lasting, that you put a structure that will survive if a new leader comes in and comes out. So why is that important that you have that structure that supports that?
Because if you create a culture, like in our case, that is centered on the empowerment of its stakeholders, and then comes a new CEO for whatever reason, and the new CEO comes and say, what? Empowerment of the stakeholders? I cannot care less. Let's empower the shareholders, back to the traditional model. That would ruin everything we would have done.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that our company would have a culture that could resist changes coming from the management, or at least some structural changes coming from the management. Of course, we expect the management to bring changes all the time, but not. And again, back to the comparison with the US, we expect the various presidents of the United States to make changes to the law, to everything, but not so much to the Constitution. And there are changes, but they're pretty unusual, because the Constitution is the guardian of our democracy.
So is that a counter power, or with a power to counter the management, or how do you put that in place so that whenever something has changed,
it's not the one thing that does it all. It takes several things. It takes one thing. It takes, for instance, is to have a counter power every time you have a power.
Okay.
That's one example. The second thing is to make sure that the power is dispersed or distributed, if you want, evenly across all levels of the organizations. That's another thing that's really important. And I could continue elaborating on this, but it has to do with dispersing power.
So what does it mean? How do you distribute that power across the organization?
Well, again, it's relatively simple in theory, at least. Every time you have a power, you need a counter power. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. Yeah. In our company, we are two co-founders, and the two co-founders own 100% of the company. And one founder is the CEO, I'm the other one, and I'm the president. So one could say, well, that's it. We have all the powers we want because, we're the managers of the company. We are the shareholders of the company. So we, in reality, can do whatever we want. So we appointed a board of directors with very high-level individuals, so people who don't depend on us for their career. They're very well-noted business people in the US. And we gave them a major power. That is, when we vote for something, we all have a vote, one person, one vote, which offsets the fact that the two founders own 100% of the shares. And it has happened already several times that we have been outvoted by the board for things we wanted to do. That's an example of counterpower. And this is something that we created, not that we don't trust our own ability to be ethical in the way we act, but because it's a matter of you have a power, you need a counterpower. Because as humans, we have a tendency to try and stretch our power. And sometimes we might, when you're in a dominant position, you might abuse your power without even knowing that you're abusing your power or without even realizing that you're abusing your power. So it's important to have, it's not even whistleblowers, but to have people who can raise their hands and say, no, that doesn't work. And that's another thing we created in our company. We have a constitution that's modeled after the Constitution of the United States. Okay. Of course, immensely simpler because we're not a country, we're a company. But we have the three powers, the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. Now, the judicial power is composed of 7 line employees. So they're not managers, VPs, or etc. They're line employees. They have been in a company for 5 years or more. They have an impeccable track record. And they have been given the authority to block any decision that's made in a company by whomever, including our CEO, if they believe that the decision that's being made contradicts our culture or our values, or our structure as a system. Or maybe we can talk about systems later. That's not really important for today's discussion. But that's really the power that was given to them. So it's all this series of things we've done are really in place to make sure that it is complicated and super complicated to abuse power. That's really the goal.
Okay. So so you have 3 powers: executive, judicial, and
legislative and executive for you.
Yeah.
You're aware that's the same in the US. Huh?
Yeah. So we talked about the judicial, so the 7 line people, line managers, they have more than 5 years of experience. But what are some of the criteria that they use to reverse or to block a decision that you would make? I mean, is that so they look at the constitution that you have created and that are a list of rules? What does it look like, basically, that constitution?
Well, they can contact the management team for 2 reasons. Either an employee went to them and said, I have been treated unfairly by the company for a million different reasons, whatever. An employee complains and said, I don't believe I have been treated fairly. So there is a series of interviews between those people. We call them the titans and the employee. And the titans will decide, and this is their call, but it's final. They will tell the employee, okay, this is receivable by the titan. We will fight for you. Or, sorry, but we don't see any infringement in culture or values. And therefore, we don't have the power to discuss this. Okay. If they believe this is a case, they will go talk to the manager could be at the highest level, like the CEO, a country manager, a project manager, etc. And they will try and find a solution. If they don't find a solution, their mission is to escalate. They can escalate up to the CEO. If the CEO doesn't want to listen to them, their next step is to go to the board. And in our constitution, there is a provision for them to go to the board. And CEOs generally don't like when people go to the board. So we've given this permission. That's an example not an example, but that's how our judicial power works.
Has it happened already?
To the board, never.
No?
No.
So the CEO was...
No, we try and solve a problem. If there is a problem, we need to address it.
Yeah.
And we always find a solution so far. But it could happen. It could happen. It's not impossible. That's why there is a provision in the Constitution for this.
Wow. And what about the legislation piece of it? Is that the board or is that another group?
No, our company has a series of subsidiaries. Actually, we are present in 8 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And because of our organization, we do not want necessarily the 8 countries to have exactly the same organization locally, because the subsidiary in Mexico, the subsidiary in Spain, the subsidiary in Bolivia, etc., might have, because of their local culture or the local legislation, they might want to do things that are not exactly the same. So once a year, we put all the employees together. The management goes there, the titans goes there, and we discuss a topic. And we say, okay, how can we have a better communication? How can we have a better whatever? Then it's a brainstorming where everybody participates and suggestions are made. And then employees, all of us, vote on the suggestions.
Okay.
And 50+1 vote gets the decision. Now, once the decision is made, it goes through a financial committee to make sure that financially is something we can afford, obviously. And if the financial committee doesn't oppose, it is something we can budget or something we can do, then that's it. It becomes a rule in our company, legislative power.
So how did you come up with this idea? Did you study the American Constitution and you say, okay, we are going to replicate that model, or where does it come from?
Well, first, when you become American, you need to learn who is supposed to learn the U.S. Constitution. And I have always been interested also in philosophy, and the 18th century has been, the siècle des Lumières, has really been a very active century when it comes to new ideas. And the U.S. Constitution has been the second written. Then the French Constitution was the third. Both were inspired from the Masonic Constitution. The Freemasons, they wrote the Constitution. And as you know, the founders of the George Washington was a Mason, etc. So they were more or less the same people, by the way, at this time. And those constitutions were inspired by the dominant philosophical ideas at the time. The Voltaire, the Rousseau, or even people like Hume or Spinoza. And there was a lot of ideas, and they converge into this idea that, we want to dissociate the church and the state. We want to give more power to the people, etc. We want to guarantee, equal rights to every single person. Well, in reality, it was not that brutal, but that's something that really fascinated me, as well as the first democracy ever, the one in Athens, or at least the first documented democracy. There were maybe others before, but they were not documented enough to have survived, or they might be lost today. And I've always been interested in the topic, and that's where the idea came from.
Okay. So how do you transform that idea into something real? How do you realize that? Because, it's not always easy. You may have great ideas, and looking at history is always a good way to learn things. But how do you put that in practice? What were the steps that you followed?
Well, the if I look at the genesis, if you want, of this constitution, the first idea, before we even had a constitution, was to create this judicial power, this Titan group. And then I saw that we were having several ideas. And I was saying, yeah, but those ideas are nice, but then we're back to the problem I don't want to have is there is no consistency. There is not one theory that is the foundation of everything. We do one thing here, one thing there, but how are we sure the model is consistent? And in researching what we could do to make those little things, put them together, I came with the idea of, well, let's write a constitution. Let's do what the countries have done. And this constitution, I wrote the first version. Then I submitted it to the Titans. No, first to the management team. It was the first to sell to all the managers of the companies. Then to sell to the Titans. And it took a little bit of back and forth. It was not necessarily an easy sell. It was not complicated, but we had to do a lot of, I don't want to use the word education, but we had to explain why do we want a constitution? It's completely unusual. No, we don't know any other company that has a constitution. So what we had to do a lot of to be persuasive, well, let's see, it's going to be to our common benefit, etc. And then we had the first version of the constitution. We did a pilot for 1 year in one country, that was Mexico. Then we noticed things that were not working really well or things that were working very well. And so we wrote the second version of the constitution that in fact is a first version. And we decided to implement it company-wide.
So let's go back in time. And I mean, you funded the company with your co-founder, but I think you told me that from the get-go, you wanted to have this new philosophy and a new way of doing that. So you bootstrap the company with a let's say a standard model, and then you transform the company as you learn as you did your PhD. What do it, or did you start? How did you start?
Okay, when you do a PhD, you learn a lot of things, but you learn a lot of theoretical things.
Yeah.
And then to go from PhD dissertation to the reality, it's not a world, it's a universe. So what I got from the PhD was really the theory. And the theory uses the theory of our company uses, or our organization, our structure draws from the theory of the system theory. And the systems theory, that emerges in the mid-20th centuries, applies a lot in biology and then has been extended to other areas, including business. The idea is that when you want to study a system, you don't want to put a microscope on your system and looks at the inside of the system. Okay, my company has sales and marketing and this and that. How do I organize this better? You put a microscope and you need to understand the system by its interaction with the environment. And that's the first step to understand the system. That is, you look at the interaction between the system and its environment. The environment might be your clients, your suppliers, the local government, the market, everything you want, the competition or do all this. And then looking at these interactions, you're going to prepare the best answers possible to events that come from the outside. And you generally want to make a decision at the point of contact between your organism and the outside world. And then you need a memory, because if you don't have a memory, you need to relearn all the time the same thing. It's not very efficient. So that is really the foundation of the foundations.
Okay. Now, so it's like an API that you create and you document that. You document that API.
But then systems can be organized in many ways. You can be systems that are hardly coupled. That means you have two systems, one dies, the second dies. One goes well, the second goes well, but they depend one of each other. Or you can have systems so-called loosely coupled. So they're not completely independent, otherwise you don't have a system anymore. But the two systems or the end systems retain a certain level of independence. And so the possibility to acquire novelty independently of other systems, etc.
So are you talking about your company as a whole, or now are we talking about some of the internal departments?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And now we're talking about the company. And for instance, there is one system. This is Blue Trail Software. It has one subsystem that is Blue Trail Software Mexico or Blue Trail Software Spain. It has another subsystem that is the office of the CTO, etc. And those systems interact together when needed, but they retain a higher level of independence.
Yeah.
I hope it will never happen, but we could imagine that having to close Blue Trail Spain without having as a consequence to also close Blue Trail Mexico or these kind of things. So that's really the idea of the loosely coupled systems. It's wonderful that the theory of loosely coupled systems works wonderfully for businesses. It has only one drawback. Is how do you keep the systems together? What's the glue that maintains, that keep the people together? And the answer is the alignment of values. So first, when you need clarity on your values, and then you need to teach your values, to teach your values again, to teach your values again, to teach your values again, and to take action when people do not respect your values.
Okay.
So that's the glue, at least in our case, the alignment of values, and our companies has a series of provisions to make sure that our values remain aligned. Now, being an international company, we also are facing different cultures and values. Well, values are linked to a culture. So it really takes a lot of education, and the education is not a global one necessarily, all the same for everybody. It has to be adjusted to each country.
Okay.
It would be vastly easier for us to be only a US company, but it's not the case. So we need to deal with this complexity.
So I want to rewind. So that sounds super cool. Reminds me of microservices and how we build loosely coupled service, architectures and so on.
Programming uses loosely coupled systems.
Exactly.
So it's the same theory.
Yeah.
The object-oriented programming draws from this theory.
And Conway's law tells us that we should map our software architecture to and our organizations. I want to go back to the early days of Blue Trail because so you started the company and then you went on a PhD, or you did the PhD before?
No, you did the PhD at the start of the company. After 1 or 2 years.
So still, I mean, it took you a while to study that environment and do your dissertation. So how did you bootstrap your company? What was the model from the get-go? Because you didn't have the Titans at that time. You didn't have, I mean, you had employees and pretty much that's it. So.
Well, I can answer this way. When companies are social constructions.
Yes.
So when you create a company, you have an idea, the founders have an idea of, for instance, in our case, we really wanted to empower people, etc. But it's just a concept. It's just a word. The culture, when society is formed historically, the culture is not something that comes exclusively from the founders. The culture comes from all the members of the tribe, the member of the company. And in fact, the culture emerges from the experience of people living together.
Mm-hmm.
It's called communities of practice. So you say something like, okay, we want to live peacefully and we want to have this concept of empowerment where we all equal. Wonderful. Then you start operating and you know these things that work and things that do not work and things that emerge, but they don't necessarily come from the CEO. CEOs contribute to the culture, of course, they're a major contributor, but any new employee you hire, you fire, contributes in a way to the culture of the company. So the culture is something that emerges from the experience. It's not something that pre-exists or precedes the experience. The experiences creates the culture. So that's why all those things, the constitution, etc., have emerged from the way we were working from the observation of the system and things that, but that works or that's missing, so we should do it. And we did it and people liked it, and that becomes part of the culture. And so that's really the way. There's nothing new at Boutwell. This is the way culture works everywhere in the world, and every single organized group of humans and luckily animals, I suppose too. So we're not different.
Yeah, but I'm interested in its inception. So, I mean, from the get-go, your co-founder and you agreed that you wanted a different model.
Mm-hmm.
And you hired people with this promise of building a new model, right? That was, or did he change over time?
No, well,
I mean, when you hire people, did they know that you were on the journey to build something different?
Of course,
yeah, okay.
From day one.
From day one.
Not only the employees, but when we do the business, we're a software development company. So I don't tell our prospects, we have, I don't know, Java developers, JavaScript developers, Python developers. Of course, we have developers. We're a software company, I guess. But we talk about our culture. This is what we sell. This is what our customer buy. Not really the culture, because they're not our company, but the advantages or the added value for them to have us having this culture. So a disciplined workforce, an engaged workforce, an autonomous workforce. This is really the benefits for our clients. And it's a huge benefit given the state of our industry, the software industry. We can discuss later about this, but that's really what we sell to our future employees, to our clients, to our suppliers, etc.
Okay. So you had that idea. How were you organized in the early days before you created the Titans and
Well, we had one thing in our company that we still have, is that all employees report to the CEO. No matter their position, no matter their job, they all report to the CEO. So, of course, practically, if an employee needs a new mouse, a new computer, they're not going to call the CEO. But if an employee has a problem, whatever, considers that he or she is not treated fairly, or that's not happy with the project or with the salary or with something with another employee, one option is to go to the Titans, of course, but the more natural option, in my opinion, is to go to the CEO, and nobody can blame the employee for walking over their head because they're just talking to their manager, the CEO. That's it. And it's been proven a very efficient way. In our case, it worked really well.
Okay. So you have a very flat organization with everyone reporting to you, the CEO?
Yes. Well, our constitution has a provision. We're not allowed to create more than 3 levels of management. That's the maximum.
Okay. So not everyone reports to the CEO then?
No, they all report to the CEO, but for practical matters, they report to either the country manager, the people's manager, the finance managers for the daily job. But in terms of reports, they report to the CEO.
What does it mean? I mean, if I look at your organigram, you would have people reporting to someone, and to the CEO, because you have 3 levels.
We don't even have. We have a provision for 3 levels, but we only have 2 levels in our organizations. We don't have. We tried when we did our pilot in Mexico. We piloted the constitution. We had a 3rd level, and we realized we were too small for having a 3rd level, so it was kind of a complication that was not needed. So we operate at 2 levels. We don't really have an organigram in our company. Well, we have something that's visible to the outside world, the CEO, the chief mentor, the CTO, but in the company, it's not that clear.
Okay. So can you give us an example of when an employee would talk to the CEO instead of the country manager? Because in your organization, if you are in the US, you report to the country manager in the US, who reports to the CEO.
Well, I'm not the CEO. That has to be clear. But there are many cases where, for instance, take an employee in Mexico, doesn't matter. Or we had a case recently in Bolivia where an employee felt it was not treated fairly by our people's manager.
Okay.
And the people's manager was saying, no, but whatever. It was sort of an internal dispute. Not dispute, but disagreement. So, the software industry for a developer is not really complicated to find a job. So this employee was on the verge of leaving, saying, well, not satisfied, they're not treating me the way I should be treated. But he shared with another colleague of him, he shared with one of his colleagues in Bolivia and said, I'm unhappy, I might leave. This colleague told our CEO. Our CEO contacted him. They had a discussion and they addressed the problem and I solved the problem.
Okay.
So in this case, it was the CEO calling. In some other case, people call directly and they say, well, I'm not happy with my project. I have been on this project for 3 or 4 years. I have the impression to plateau. I have talked to my, project manager, country manager, everything, but apparently not much is happening. I really want to change our project. Now, it's not that every time you talk to the CEO, you get a positive answer to your request. That would be too nice. But at least the whole idea, again, coming from my own history with these pyramidal organizations, when you're at the bottom of the pyramid and you talk to your direct manager, anyway, the person doesn't have the power to make any decision. He needs to go to one step higher, where generally there's not much power, and then your request get lost somewhere. And I hated this. I think it's disrespectful for the person who has a problem. So we wanted to make sure that every voice in our company has to be heard.
But how do you scale? I mean, today you have 200 employees, more or less?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot already to talk to one CEO.
No, but hopefully,
not
thanks God, not everybody has a problem. Otherwise, that would really mean our system doesn't work. No, it does not happen that often. It might happen once a month, once every other month.
Okay.
It's not common, but it happens.
But how will you scale? I mean, if tomorrow you are 500 or 1,000 people,
or 10,000 people, the idea is not necessarily to talk to the CEO, is to talk to a person who has the power to make a decision. So as the company grows, and because we are limited by the number of levels, the day we are 10,000 employees, a manager at level 2 will have all the possible power to address a concern of an employee.
Okay.
So because we would have split in smaller groups.
Okay, I can see
that's really the idea.
Yeah.
I talk to someone who has the power to say yes or no, but not to someone who will say, well, I don't know, let me talk. This is super frustrating. I don't know if it happened to you in your career already. It happened to me several times. I understand what you're saying, but we cannot do anything. Meaning I cannot do anything because I don't want to bother my own boss. And it's not something we value at Blue Trail.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I like the idea. I just wonder, how is that scalable for the first line manager? So your country managers, they have 50 or more people reporting to them. How do you, I'm reading Team Topologies. I think it's a great book. And there are many studies that show that, and this book is talking about that shows that you can't create meaningful relationship with more than 17 people.
17?
Yeah, 17, 17. And how do you manage those people? How do you lead them? How do you help them in their career progression and also manage performance when there is a problem?
There are two things. One is really particular to our company. We're a software development company. So what matters to us in terms of organization is the project. It's not the country, it's not the whatever, it's the project. And so when it comes to projects, you mentioned 17, I think we can go a little higher, like 25, but it's this range, and certainly below 50. Once you reach a size to 40, 50 people, you need mid-management. It's impossible to manage all the people directly. So, but coming back to our organizations, we have an organization by project. Generally, a project is what? 10 people, 15 people.
Okay.
Could be less, but well, let's say 5 to 15. That's 90% of our projects are in this range. And we use the Agile methodology. And Agile has a provision in their manifesto for self-organizing teams.
Yes.
So when you work in a team, in a project team, well, first, you don't really depend on the country manager, from the CEO, etc. You work with a project manager or a scrum master. It really depends on the situation. And the team, we try as much as we can to be self-organized. So problems need to be tackled and addressed by the team. That's the ideal case. And that's what we want to have all the time. Most of the time. Now, of course, if there's a problem with the salary, that's nothing to do with the project teams that need to be addressed by the country manager, etc. But that's the whole idea. We don't envision, even if we have 10,000 employees in a company, we don't envision large teams. Well, there would be teams with more than 15 employees, obviously. But again, because we have this provision that prevents us to have more than 3 levels of depth, when a team grows beyond a certain size, we need to split the team.
Yeah. So that's aligned with the Agile methodology and what is described in the book that I'm reading, team topologies. So okay, so that's good for shipping products and delivering results to customers. I still don't understand how a manager having 50 or more people can manage the career of their individuals. You can't self-organize that. I mean, if I'm, for example, I'm a developer, what is the path for me to become a senior developer or principal developer?
Well, that's one thing. That's part of our culture. I always tell the employees, if you expect me to promote you, you will never be promoted. That's as simple as that. So don't wait for you to be promoted. There is not a book in our company that says if you have been 2 years at this position, you qualify for. Doesn't exist. And I don't want that to exist. People need to create their own career path. It's part of the empowerment philosophy. If somebody creates your own path, and it was my case, I started as a developer. After 2 years, Remi, you're a very good developer. Now you're a business analyst. Oh, well, then Remi, you're a good business analyst. Now you're a project manager. And now you're a whatever. But nobody asked me if I wanted to be a business analyst or if I wanted to be a project manager to this matter. Yeah. I was fortunate enough that in each position it worked and I didn't encounter the Peter's principle too soon in my growth. But again, nobody would care about what I wanted to do. But in a company like Blue Trail, where we put humans at the center, we need to care about what people want.
Yeah.
So what I consider the role of the company is we cannot empower people. You cannot go to a person and say, I empower you, I make you a leader. That doesn't exist. This is something that comes from within.
Yeah.
Now, what you can do is create the conditions that will compel a person to empower himself or herself. And that is good working conditions, a nice office settings, a nice equipment, computers, etc., an interesting project, a good salaries, etc. And then I expect people to come and say, hey, I'm a developer. I would like to be a project manager. I would like to turn to sales. I would like to turn to this, to that. And the role of the company is to prepare the ground and help the person becomes what the person wants to become. Of course, if a person comes tomorrow and say, I want to open a restaurant, well, I don't know, but it's very unlikely that we will. But we can help the people and maybe buy some food from the restaurant for our employees. I don't know. But if the career path has something to do with our business, I think it's the role of the company to help the people become what they want to become. And bear in mind that when a person does what she or he wants, this person will be certainly very engaged, will perform much better than if this person does something she might not want to do.
Yeah, no,
or
no.
she just
I've no
does
doubt
it
about
for the salary. Okay, I have a good paycheck, so I'll do it, but that's it.
I've no doubt about that. I think, I'm having regular one-on-ones with my directs, my teammates, to understand what they want to do. And we are having that discussion on a regular basis and making sure that I'm here to help them, opening the doors and giving them opportunities so they can get to the next level or to the next job. If they want to go and say, "Oh, I want to become a product manager, or I want to become something else, or I want to grow in that role and go to the next level." I feel that as a leader, this is also my role to help them thrive. And I'm giving them. I want to empower them, and I'm giving them the opportunities to do so, to grow, and the project that they need to be able to demonstrate that they can operate at the next level, and so on. But I feel that. So I wonder how it works. I mean, let's take an example of one developer, and he say, "Okay, I want to become the next level, so a principal or staff engineer or whatever." So the engineer will come and say, "Hey, I want this." So how do you? So you empower them. Okay, what does it mean? I mean, and what's the process of a promo?
Okay. Well, first, I want to make a comment on what you just said. You said, I want to be good and empower my employees, my team. The comment I have is, this is wonderful, but the day you will be promoted, does the company has a provision to make sure that your successor will follow the same path? And that's what we do in our company, because people get promoted, they leave, etc. And we need to make sure that we have an approach that is consistent.
Yes.
Because you might promise something to an employee. If you leave, your successor is also liable for the promise you made, and cannot come and say, "Well, I don't know what he said, but it doesn't matter. Now it's different." So that's the one.
So I can respond to that. I mean, in the company that I'm working with at the moment, there is indeed a shared responsibility between the employee and the leadership team on their promo path. But I think we are clear enough to explain what is required for that individual to go to the next level, and irrespective of the manager, that should happen. The manager responsibility, though, is that they put together the documentation based on the facts and what the employee did. So there is this responsibility. So indeed, there will be a need, and indeed, that's something that needs to be provisioned, as you said. But it's not. I can see that there are flows, and sometimes that would not happen.
Yeah, everywhere there are flows.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to, we have two things. When it comes to the career path, we have a document in our kind of online documentation for our employees that tells you, if you want to become, you say, the project manager, this is the recommended path to become a project manager, knowing that you're starting from QA engineers, whatever that is. Then we have an assessment group. The assessment group defines for each position. So it could be, for instance, semi-senior, position 1, position 2, position 3, senior 1, senior 2, senior 3, principal, distinguished. For each position, there is a document that's visible and accessible by all employees that's defined the criteria to go to a certain level. So for the lowest levels up to engineer senior position 1, most of the criteria require technical criteria. When you go to senior position 2 and above, there are much more requirements on your personality, your attitude. We need the input from the client. If the client opposes, it's not that we'll oppose, but if the client gives a negative or not positive assessment of the employee, that would block or prevent a promotion. So we have an assessment group. Those are, again, line employees who are in charge of defining this assessment. And we don't have it for really all positions, but most positions. Now we have new positions with more and more AI developers. So we're always lagging, of course, in terms of but for most of for say 80 to 90% of our employees, they have a clear path of, okay, I want to become a senior position too. They go, they see there is an exam, they know what the exam will be.
There's an exam. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think, so we do have also role guidelines that explain, okay, this is what level 1, level 2, level 3 would do, and how you can move from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. So that's very well documented. It's managed by the committee of practice. Basically, we agree on what it looked like, and then we put that in a document, and everyone has access to it.
Yeah.
What I don't get from what you said is that the employee, to be able to succeed in that promotion, needs to be given opportunities. As in, if you want to go to the senior level 2, you need maybe a certain scope of work to be able to demonstrate that you are capable of doing that. But if your manager is not aware, if the country manager managing so many people is not aware of that demand, they are not necessarily assigning the project where the employee would be able to demonstrate their strength.
Yes, I understand. But employees have regular one-on-one with their managers, their country managers, and during these one-on-ones, they are asked to explain or to share their career path. And an employee might say, I have been in this position of senior position 1. I would like to go to senior position 2. So then the country manager's role is to call the assessment group and the people's management team and say, okay, this employee would like to become a senior position 2, and it starts a process.
Okay, that's...
I think it works quite well. It's not a thing that doesn't work or that has many flaws. This is one thing that's really solid.
Yeah, I trust you. It's just that I wonder how it scales because, the more direct you have, the more cognitive load that brings to the manager, the country manager. So they need to make sure that, this person told me about that, and I need to provide them with this opportunity so they can go to the next level, which you can do for a smaller group when a group is becoming bigger. This is where the scaling effect is a bit challenging.
Well, even if we have a very large group, we don't have that many positions and that many ranks. We do software development. It might be more complicated for a company that for Amazon because you do many different things. So you have many more. But of course, it's a giant company. But in our case, we do software development. So we have project managers, developers, QA engineers, business analysts. But it's a very limited list. And it's going to be the case for any foreseeable future.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. How do you manage performance? Because you have your project group and they are self-organized. Is that a 360 type of feedback?
Yeah, we do 360s. I'm not a big fanatic of 360s, but we do 360s. We do one-on-one. Employees have more than a one-on-one per year. They have one per quarter, or it depends on. But generally, it's one per quarter. They have 360s. We do postmortems on projects.
Mm-hmm.
We request regularly customer assessments.
Okay.
So and then we do the people's group does a kind of a global assessment of the person.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the way it works.
So that helps you to get a sense of the performance of the individual, and then you can manage it.
Yeah. And we try to, as you know, because it's the case in every single company on the planet, it's never a good idea to pay an employee too much or not enough for a given level, because you create discrepancies, you create frustration. If you're not paying enough, you might leave. If you pay too much, you might not leave because you want to keep the salary, but you might not be the right person for the job. So it's also our interest to make sure that if we measure the performance properly.
Yeah.
That is, and it's true for every company. It's not particularity of Blue Trail. It's true everywhere.
So I want to go back to employee engagement. So I understand that the structure will empower people, and you thought about it. But there is a culture also, or there are different cultures, and also I think in some countries the report to a manager or the voice of a manager is important. So how do you change that, or how do you adapt, or how do you bring people, for example, in Mexico, there's a strong culture of the leader in Latin America.
That's correct.
So how do you onboard employees to empower them to feel that they can feel that they are empowered and they don't have to follow the leader?
Well, that's really a good question, because it's a challenge of a company that is international, because you're facing several cultures. Well, it could be the same with a company that's present in different regions of the US, but we are in different countries and we have these problems. A Dutch sociologist created the so-called power distance, that is a tool to measure the distance between an average citizen and the dominant group, let's say, in a country. And when you look, for instance, at the US is has a relatively low power distance. It's very similar to Argentina, but countries like Mexico or Bolivia have a much higher power distance. And a high power distance means that an average person will hardly discuss a decision made by the management. Even if the person really believes this is a wrong thing to do, they will say, yes, sir, and they will execute. And there are other indicators. I mean, Hofstede created, I think, 6 or 7 indicators. There is also a sense of community. The US is a country that is very individualist. People help each other, but up to a certain extent, and like to be recognized and acknowledged as a person. Mexico is a much more of a communitarian country, and it's pretty complicated. For instance, if you have a comment to make to an employee in Mexico, to single out the employee, especially if it's not a positive comment, is not a good idea at all. You frustrate not only the employee, but you frustrate the entire group of employees. Okay. So you need to be careful with all this. So when we interview an employee, we explain the culture of the company. Say, well, I love it. It's wherever the employee is located. They say it's really the kind of companies I always dreamed of joining. But then when they join the company, I don't know what happens, but they start believing, well, maybe it's a trick. And the first time I open my mouth, it will be the last time also. So I kind of better shut up and don't do anything special. There are only one answer I know to this is training. And you need to repeat the training. You cannot just say things once during the onboarding. You have the permission to call the CEO and expect the person to call the CEO. It doesn't work like that. The person might even forget that he or she has the right to call the CEO after a couple of weeks. So the only thing I really believe, there are 2 things. One is, in fact, the examples. People in groups, in projects, will see that people who have been in a company for a while don't hesitate, Call Rosalba, call the CEO, discuss with the CEO, talk to the country manager. No, say no to the client. We're never going to be able to deliver by Friday. And so they see that their colleagues do it, and that's, okay, well, maybe I can do it. That's the one thing, but it's not sufficient. We also need to train people, and we can come back to training if you want, but I'm a firm believer in repeating messages, the key messages, in repeating. It's not even repeating, it's hammering and hammering and hammering the core messages. So that's the way to convince our people that it's a trade-off. They need to keep their culture, of course. Changing culture takes an epiphany. So they keep their culture, but they need to take advantage of the tools they have being an employee of Blue Trail. Now, still a Mexican will be, still have a tendency to push the group forward as opposed as an individuality. That's okay. It's a culture. I respect that. And I'm not saying it's not as good or it's better, or it's what it is. And it's what it is.
Okay. Interesting. On LinkedIn, you claim we believe that companies like ours can perform better than traditional ones, not just in terms of profit, but also in areas like employee engagement, customer satisfaction, and sustainability. So, I want to believe in it, and I think it's great. But can you share some? What are some of the data you could share with us to understand the order of magnitude of this improvement?
It's an evidence. Now it's an evidence that needs to be measured. And when I'm saying it's an evidence, I really believe, and I have a hard time even questioning this, that if an employee is motivated, is well paid, is engaged, there is a benefit for the company. The person will work more, will work better, will be more responsible, will be more responsive. I don't see any pros. I don't see any cons. I only see pros. I only see advantages. Now, of course, we need to measure this. Now, bear in mind that we have a particular population in our company. Our employees are software developers, generally between 25 and 35 years old. It's pretty demanding. We worked, I told you, on sophisticated projects. This is fast-paced projects, highly demanding. So some people, when they get older, still like to continue on this kind of project. Some prefer to work for companies where pace is maybe not the same. So we're dealing with young people. And that's an important part of the equation. So it's the equation. Some people come millennial, etc., and they have a particular culture, etc. And with all this, I forgot your question.
I was asking for data.
Data.
How better are you from traditional companies?
One piece of data is the attrition rate. We have a significantly lower attrition rate than the industry. The industry last year had an attrition rate over 50%. I'm talking about the software industry. It's not the industry.
50.
I think it was 57 last year.
So one person, so you have a team of two, one of them will leave this year.
And the Bay Area is known for this, so you should be aware. But it's true everywhere for software developers, at least. The demand for software developers, given the shortage there is in the US, the demand is worldwide. Yeah. The country that's known for the highest turnover possible is India. It's even higher than the US. So we have a turnover below 30%. And I need to make something clear. This turnover of people who leave is less than 20%. The others are people who have been terminated by a company. And this is terminating employees, something we can discuss later. But still, even counting everything, we have a much lower attrition rate than the industry at large. Another indicator is the engagement level. And generally, engagement level for a good company, a good engagement level is 50%. If you have one employee out of two engaged, that's a good level. We are in the mid-60s, like 63, 64. Last time we made a measure after a training. Now we are going to start another training. After this, we will do this measure again. So we have a very high engagement level. Of course, we'd love to have 100% engagement level, but it's never possible because it's not necessarily that employees don't want to engage, but people have problems in their life. They might go to a family event. They might be in the middle of a divorce. They might have concerns. Their performance goes down. Their engagement goes down. So we need to accept that there is a sort of organic 10% minimum of people who are not engaged properly, not because they don't care, because they have in their personal life the problem that has become bigger than the performance at work. Yeah. That offsets the performance at work. So that's really important. So that's another indicator. Another indicator, the last one, is the churn. I mean, the customer retention.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's difficult to have a higher customer retention than we are. We're very close to 100%.
Wow.
We lost one client last year. Well, we work for startups. Sometimes startups have a short life. So we might lose the client, but well, unfortunately, the startup had to stop its activities. But last year we lost only one client who decided to put all their development team in India. That was only one client. This year we haven't lost any. Even with the massive layoffs, some clients of ours have terminated contractors, etc. All contractors except Bluetrail. So we're very proud. It's kind of the highest possible customer retentions. We have clients who have been with us from the beginning. One of them is Samsung.
Mm-hmm.
And Samsung is one of the largest organizations in the world. So as you know, large organizations regularly go through cost-cutting operations. And generally when you do cost-cutting, you start terminating your contractors. That's one of the first thing companies do. We have survived everything. And we've been there for 10 years. And it speaks very highly of the engagement of our employees.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of the employees of this company.
Can see that, yeah. So what is a California Benefit Corporation and what that entails?
Well, we are California Benefit Corporations. We are a for-profit company. A benefit corporation is something that is open to for-profit corporations, mm-hmm. not to non-profit. And when you create a corporation, before being a benefit corporation, we were we were a C corporation, C Corp. So when you create a corporation, the goal of the corporation is to serve the interests of the shareholders. It's normal, it's natural. People have invested money in a company and it's normal that they want to maximize their profit.
Yeah.
So it's always been like that in capitalism. We're not discussing this kind of things. A benefit corporation is a corporation that takes an additional commitment. And instead of having a commitment before their shareholders, they have a commitment before their stakeholders. So again, stakeholder might be employees, the clients, government, suppliers, the local communities where we have our offices, and you name it, there's many constituencies. So it means that the performance of our managers is not only measured on dollars, on economic considerations, but also on their contribution to the sustainability, to other criteria, to employee satisfaction, to customer satisfaction, to supplier satisfaction. And it is the role of the board. Normally, when you have a board, the board represents the interest of the shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
The board of a benefit corporation represents the interest of the stakeholders. So the board needs to take actions against management if the board believes the management doesn't take care properly of the stakeholders and maybe only of the shareholders, or if there is an imbalance between many companies, for instance, treat their clients very well, but when it comes to the supplier, well, that's another question. And we believe we need to treat our suppliers very well. When we have a small suppliers, we generally pay them when we receive their invoice. Of course, never when we receive, but like a week after we receive the time to process. Now, of course, if a supplier, we're buying Apple computers, no need to pay Apple in advance because they have enough cash. I think that's okay. They don't depend on the Bluetrail order. But, small suppliers, it's important. One day of having to wait one day or one extra day can really hurt. So this kind of small things, to help the suppliers have a better life. Pay them well. Don't try to negotiate when we negotiate with our giant clients, they try to save every penny, every cent, and that's okay. It's part of the game. I'm with it. But when we work with smaller suppliers, we try to be a little more lenient, a little more generous to keep them for a longer term.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit corporation. And to become a benefit corporation, It's a status that is recognized in the US. The first states to recognize it, it's state by state. The first state to recognize it was Maryland in 2010. Now, I don't know if all states recognize the benefit corporation status, but California does, and I think it's most of the states, if not all of the states today, keeps growing. And what you need to do to become benefit corporations is very simple. You need to amend your articles of incorporations. So you submit to, in our case, the state of California. We didn't change articles much. We just added a sentence. We are a benefit corporation. So, but it's not a very complicated things to do. And then that's it.
You don't have any assessments?
No. But well, you have the assessments done by the board.
By the board.
Now, there is something else.
So B Corp.
The B Corp. That's something different. There is an independent organism called B Lab that provides with a B Corp certification. And you don't have to be a benefit corporation, or you can be a benefit corporation. The two things are completely disconnected. Generally people confuse the two things. Yes. B Lab has a series of questions, about always forget, but about the governance of the companies, the workers, the clients, the environment, etc. And for each of this topic, they ask you like 50 questions, 60 questions. You answer each questions, and depending on your answer, you get points.
Yeah.
Then you make the total of your points. If you have 80 points or more, you get certified B Corp by B Lab. If you get less, then that's you need to do the test again.
Yeah.
So, but to us, maybe that has to do with my personality, but all the things we did at Blue Trail as a theoretical foundation, which I can explain and debate about, the theory of the systems theory and everything you want. When you answer the question of B Lab, it's a long series of questions that you answer, and you might not even know why you want these things, why you want to do these things. Now, if you really want to do something good, we should have to define good. But suppose, let's simplify. You want to do something good and you really don't have any idea how to proceed. This is really interesting to take the B Corp assessment, even if you don't get the assessment, because it will give you a lot of ideas, in
guidelines.
terms, discrepancies between the lowest and highest salaries. And, for each of their questions, you have a reference to official documentation from the United Nations or whatever. So it's very well documented. It's a lot of work, but you can learn a lot in the process of things you have to do to be, I don't want to say good corporation, but
to comply with the B Corp.
To comply, exactly. Okay. Well, let's put it this way. To comply with the requirements of a B Lab.
Okay.
So there's two different things. We have some clients who are benefit corporations and B Corp, or we are benefit corporations, we're not B Corp. Two different things.
Okay.
But the overall idea is the same, in fact, serving the stakeholders, contributing to creating a sustainable world, which is benefit from the resources of our planets without impairing the ability of the next generation to benefit from our planets.
Okay. Yeah. In the way you talk about your company or structure, there's a lot of legacy, or what would be the future without you, basically. So the resilience of your system or the organization that you build feels
I don't know, future will tell. We have been in business 10 years. We went through very good times. We've been through more difficult times, not necessarily big recessions, but we are in San Francisco, California. The local industry has been hit very hard by the massive layoffs from the leaders. I mean, the Google and etc. And I'm not even sure it's over. That creates a major disruption in the industry, and we managed to go through this. I wouldn't say unarmed, because yes, we were armed, of course. But I think we have, again, if you have engaged employees, you have resilient employees.
Yeah.
If you have resilient employees, you have a resilient organization. That's at least what I believe. So, but we don't know. I would be foolish to say that our system is recession proof, has no problems, that everything's perfect. It's not the case. But we certainly have created an ecosystem with a high level of engagement, a high level of customer satisfaction. And well, maybe I'm a small player, but that's enough for me. That's good enough. And I want to be better, questioning the status quo. But this is really what matters the most for the two founders of the company. So we're generally satisfied and want to do more and more and more because we know firsthand that it works to bet on people.
Yeah. So talking about resiliency and changing the status quo, how do you take decisions in the context of your company and the constitution and all the framework that you put in place? So you have the executive power, so you can propose new things or a new direction to the company, and then you have for the company, and then so you have the board that will vote. But is the legislation body the one who is going to vote for it, or
no? Generally, the legislative power votes for what makes the life of the company better. A better communication, better communication internally, better communication with clients, and this kind of things. Career paths and this kind of things. This is really what we call the legislative power, where our employees vote. Then we have the executive power that the CEO generally. Well, we have an office of the CEO, but it's a nice way to call the management team, and 7 people who, in fact, are in charge of deciding the options of the company. Okay, we're going to open a new country. We're opening a subsidiary in Tunisia, or we're going to start providing services in security, or etc. So this is the decision of the executive committee, and it does not require a vote. We need to remain agile. That would and if we need to change banks, because for instance, we wanted to move our banking from a very large bank in the US to a bank that's also a benefit corporation. And well, we're not going to ask our developers to vote on this because we don't think it would have a particular added value. And so it's a process that's decided by the executive team, and then we just implement and we move our business, or we don't. But that doesn't require approval by the employees.
Okay.
And we don't necessarily seek approval to the board for anything we do. I mean, the board and the mechanism for benefit corporation is the same than for C corporation. The board elects one person, the CEO, to represent the interest of the board. So the CEO is not expected to go to the board and, can I do this? Can I do that? Well, sometimes the things we debate with the board, of course, but most of the decisions are not changing completely the history of the company. They're more in tactical decisions, and we're certainly not going to bother the board with this.
Okay. But if you were to make a big strategic decision, would developers be involved in defining the vision for, let's say, what's the vision for the company for the next 10 years? Is that something that you would do? Because you talked about Michel Leclerc earlier from Decathlon, and last episode I recorded with the CEO of COO of Decathlon US, explaining me that they work on a vision altogether, and they, because they want people to have skin in the game and they, be part of that process of brainstorming and agreeing on what's next for the next 3 years or 4 years. So is that what you do as well? Or?
We have this kind of discussions when we have our so-called summits with our employees. We generally have a session where we discuss the future of the company, not necessarily to make decisions, but discuss the future of the company. We also have open mic where once a month I guess people from a country are connected to the CEO and ask a question. But that's different. It's not generally to discuss about big changes. But yeah, we had In 2021, we were considering an acquisition. We were considering acquiring a company. Not we didn't have a target, but well, we knew what kind of company we wanted. We had a couple of discussions with employees, and the outcome of the discussion was, well, we have a very special culture. If we acquire a company, are we strong enough to make sure that we can integrate the people, because we don't have a culture of the companies that perform an acquisition, empty the company, that's it. And the answer was no, we're not ready. If we bring another company that doesn't really have a culture that's fundamentally completely aligned to ours, which is not very easy to have a culture aligned to ours. And so the discussion was, no, they're not a good idea to pursue.
Okay,
so it was not very formal, but it was a series of discussions with the employees where people would give their advice. Some of our people come from very big companies, from Globant, Accenture, etc. So they went through the process. They were part of the company. These companies acquire companies all the time, so they could give an interesting opinion. And it turned out we're not ready, given our culture. We're not really ready for an acquisition.
Okay, but the net is that the executive power have the power to make decisions and to.
Of course.
Okay, they don't have to. But if something that the execs have decided is not aligned with what employees want, they can overthrow that decision.
Employees?
Yeah.
No, they need to go to the Titans. And the Titans can overthrow a decision if it contradicts our culture, values, or fundamental structure.
Okay.
Other than that, they cannot. Suppose the CEO decides, okay, I'm doing this acquisition. Well, Titans can always go to the CEO and say, well, you endanger the culture of the company, but that would have been a tough call to demonstrate that I would indeed endanger the culture. Could have been a possibility, but it's not an easy case to win.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Have you looked into developer experience? The concept of developer experience in the...
No.
Because, since you have a majority of software engineer, there are some very interesting studies that are around, how to improve the environment for developers. That would improve the level of engagement and satisfaction. So maybe that's another step for you, since you are such a tech company, to look into that and as a next step for further improvement, and specifically on the engagement.
But I'm interested if you have more information on this. I'm all in. The developers, software developers, are a very particular population.
Yes.
This is a stressful job. Not everybody is interested in spending 8 hours a day sitting in front of a monitor, having little interaction with others. Every population has its particularities, but we are facing some challenges. But we also have, it gives a lot of opportunities, because some people who might have difficulties to find a job in society can be outstanding software developers. It's demonstrated that people with a light Asperger's syndrome might be outstanding developers. We have some in our company, and there are also interesting things attached to the personality of most software developers.
Yeah. So I'm going to interview someone who is an expert in neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is basically recognizing that we are all different in the way we operate, and specifically people that are on the spectrum of autism or have ADHD, they operate differently. So one of the challenge that I've been facing is how to build a thriving environment for those people who operate a bit differently than what we call neurotypical. in the way they interact with others, in the way we provide feedback, and so on as leaders, and also as a group, but also how to make them to set up them for success. In many companies, those individuals will not be successful because they will not be able to operate as they need to. And I'm very interested in this topic because my kids have ADHD, so they may be impacted. So I want to learn more, and I have also had in my teams people with that are not neurotypical, and so I'm going to interview someone on that
Please.
topic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and this is one of the careers that opens a world of opportunities.
Yes.
Where for some people who otherwise would really have a hard time performing, say, normally.
Yeah.
And here they can not only perform normally, but they can be outstanding and very valued.
Clearly, yeah. And going back to developer experience, I will share a study on that topic. That's a big topic for me because I've been focusing on that for a while. But yeah,
Thank you.
I read a great article today, and it's very interesting. Okay, thank you so much. So we are reaching the end of this interview and the conversation, rather. And I like to understand. I like to ask my guests how they grow and how they keep learning as a leader. So, how do you keep growing as a leader?
Well, there are things I don't necessarily want to disclose, but I have reached a point in my career where my main challenge is not to learn, it's to unlearn. When you're very young and you have no experience, people come to you, well, you have no experience, we cannot give you responsibilities. But I don't like the experience. I really don't like experience. When you have somebody with no experience, the person will use their brain to make a decision. When you have experience, you use your memory. Oh yeah, I have seen that before, and I'm going to do the same as I did in the past. Or if it didn't work in the past, I'm going to do something different. And of course, the older you grow, the more experience you get, and the less you solicitate your brain or you solicitate your memory, but not your brain. And in our industry, we're software development, we're dealing with so-called complex systems. That is, systems whereby the same causes do not produce the same effects over time. So experience is, I don't want to say completely irrelevant, that's not true, but experience is largely irrelevant. If you want to develop a new banking system, people first thing they would hire a very seasoned project manager with experience in banking system. And that's the first step to failure. I not even started the project, it's already failed, or at least has a high probability to fail. So I want to, ideally, it's not that I can do it, I want to see each situation as a new situation. Maybe I had something similar 5 years ago, but it wasn't similar. It was 5 years ago, it was a different context, it was a different team, it was maybe a different country, a different client. So what's the same? And even if it would be the same client, the same team, where 5 years later, the outcome might be entirely different. So I really want to keep this ability to sense and probe, as opposed as, to sense and I remember. I don't want to remember. Well, I don't want to lose my capacity to remember, but it's really about unlearning when you reach a certain level of knowledge in an area. The experience becomes your biggest enemy, and I'm really convinced of this. So I really keep challenging myself by not calling upon my experience to do things, but upon my ability to analyze a problem rapidly.
So staying curious, basically.
Yeah.
That's good. Would you have a book to recommend? If you have one book to recommend to someone that you would like to offer to everyone, what would it be?
Well, there is 2 books that we have in all of our libraries. One book is called The Resonant Leader by Richard Boyatzis. And I remember, he's a big guy in the area of leadership, and he's come teaches at the MIT, Harvard, etc. And I remember once when I was in the PhD, he was in Chicago giving a conference, and so of course it was a full room because it's pretty well known. And so I don't know, you have maybe 200 or 300 people on each side and the central alley, and the guy enter and he walks. He had the microphone already connected, and he starts walking. He said, when you're young, you walk like that. And then he starts getting down a little bit. He said, and then you get married, and then you have children. And then he ended up laying down on the floor, crawling on the floor. And there was an illustration of his theory about resonance. But I found that really amazing. And I like really his theory. This is a very profound, that's a beautiful definition of hope, which I would recommend to everybody. And that's one book. The second book has to do with positive deviance, is also a book on leadership. And positive deviance is the idea that when you go to the doctor, that's because something's wrong. You're sick or whatever. And you want the doctor to take you from wrong to normal. But nobody goes to the doctor to go from normal to superb. No, you don't go to the doctor and say, well, I feel super good. What can I give me? So I feel even better. And the idea of this person is that we should shoot for being deviant, positively deviant. We should question the status quo. We should never be satisfied with what we have, whatever it is. We should go for something bigger, something larger. So question ourselves, question what we know, question our doubt, question what we don't doubt. Everything needs to be questions. We do not know if there is such a thing as a reality, so it's a door open to questioning everything.
Matrix.
The taboo.
Okay, cool. Wow. Thank you for sharing those. Are you hiring at the moment? Any open positions do you have?
Yeah, we are hiring all the time.
So if someone is interested, they can, how do they apply? They go on the website?
Oh, we have through the website, there is a portal for applying, and our website is bluetrail.software.
Okay. Thank you. And last question. What other leaders should I interview next? Who would you recommend that I have a conversation with?
Well, I mentioned Richard Boyatzis. I think he's an interesting person. Another person, but he's in France now, he was, when I met him, he was working in California, was running the Samsung project. He works now at Decathlon. He's a chief digital officer.
Oh.
In charge of the transformation. So he joined Decathlon. Decathlon has always been a very active company, but the software department was not the most active ever. And he has changed this dramatically. He's an outstanding person. He experiences Decathlon, which is an interesting company by all means. And so if you have a chance of interviewing him, that's certainly something that would make sense. Now, I know you were interviewing somebody from Decathlon, so you might want to.
But do you know him? Can you introduce me to?
Of course, I know him pretty well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
He's a friend of mine. I'm very proud to be his friend.
Yeah. I love that.
But again, now he's back to Lille now.
Yeah.
To France.
Okay. I will fly to France anyway for the summer, so I can do that. Thanks so much, Remi. It was super interesting. I've learned a lot. I took a lot of notes. And what you have built is quite impressive. I mean, it's like a mini country in itself. And but yeah, thanks for sharing that experience and all your expertise on the domain. It's amazing. And I will share the feedback that I'm getting from the audience with you.
Please, I will be super interested. And thank you for having me today. Thank you for all your questions and for your time.
Thank you, Remi.
Okay, bye.
Bye. You stayed until the end. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pay It Forward Society. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share it with at least 2 people who would benefit from this discussion. Your support helps me reach more people and make a greater impact. You can also help me get discovered by leaving a 5-star rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. I appreciate your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you. Bye.